Joining us now is Democratic Congresswoman Jahana Hayes of Connecticut. She's also on the House Education and Workforce Committee. Thank you for coming on, Congresswoman. We've been talking about how the Trump administration is trying to dismantle certain agencies, including the Department of Education. That is next on DOJ's list. You are a former high school teacher and the 2016 National Teacher of the Year. What is your response to that?
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. I think the actions of the president are absolutely illegal. Congress and the executive branch are separate but co-equal branches. And I'm very concerned by the fact that Speaker Mike Johnson is ceding the power of Congress, our Article I authority. If the president wants to look at the Department of Education and make reforms, there is a process by which we do that, and it has to include congressional oversight. But this tear everything down with no plan to rebuild it or how we're going to service the needs of 49 million children in this country is incredibly dangerous.
Democrats, though, are in the minority. How do you plan to fight back against that? And your argument is, look, we're a co-equal branch of government. We have power under the Constitution. What are you going to do?
Well, I think it's going to start with, as you said in your last segment, the courts, with lawsuits being filed. Individual members of Congress don't have standing to file lawsuits, but I think that outside groups will file lawsuits if this were to happen, to show that this is illegal. A department that was authorized by Congress can only be dismantled by Congress. And then we step in and conduct our oversight. We exercise our authority as members of Congress. The best way I can do that is by showing up to work every day, by voting, by making procedural motions, using every legislative tool at our disposal. And then finally, I think that we have to educate the public as to what this really means. 7.5 million children receive special education services. If their states no longer receive federal funding from Congress, it doesn't negate the law. Those services still have to be provided. So districts are going to have to decide, do we cut these services or do we raise taxes? The Department of Education is in charge of civil rights protections of $1.6 trillion in the student loan program. So people really need to understand what is at risk if the department is dismantled. So our job is to educate the public and let them know the real world consequences of these actions.
Let's continue that part of the conversation on the Department of Education, because as you know, education assessments show that students are behind on key metrics like reading and math. And Republicans might argue the Department of Education isn't putting its funds to good use to improve these scores, and it's better left to local officials. What do you say to that?
I say that's a fair argument, but if you double down on that a little bit more, you'll see that those scores are brought down by mostly red states where they are failing to invest in education. Education is handled at the local level. Curriculum and instruction and things like that are already handled at the local level. So that's where those decisions are made. Curriculum decisions are made. But as a teacher, I can tell you that it's not just about what happens inside of that building. You have kids who show up who are hungry, who are housing insecure, whose families don't have access to family medical leave and can't stay home with them when they are sick, who literally all of these outside forces, if we want to really have a conversation about getting the best outcomes for our children, then we need to look about all of those variables that disrupt their learning, school shootings, things like that. So Republicans have a fair argument to say that our students are not where they need to be. So let's have some congressional oversight and fix it, not tear it down.
If you think the Trump administration, is such a threat by tearing down, in your words, agencies like the Department of Education and the legislative branch isn't doing its job, why aren't Democrats more unified in their messaging right now?
Well, I think that we are. There are attacks coming from every direction. The chaos that this department has caused to the American people, every day it's something else. And Democrats have been clear that we will use every legislative tool at our disposal. I think that people really need to understand, like I said, what these things mean. Because when we talk about agencies, or Republicans are picking out one little thing about the agency, or there was fraud here, so this agency should fall down, Democrats don't disagree. let's look at it. Let's streamline agencies. Let's figure out where we can save money. But it doesn't happen by breaking everything apart with no plan and then causing this chaos and fear amongst the American people. So people really need to understand what it means for Elon Musk to have access to their information from the Treasury Department, what it means for their children to lose Title I services in low-income school districts in all of those areas. Really having a full appreciation for if these services and programs are cut, this is what it means to you and your family.
And we should know in the Treasury system, a judge did shut down the access, for now at least, for Elon Musk and his staffers to access that. Of course, there is a fair question, is that happening? Are they following that? But I want to follow up because, you know, Democrats, as we pointed out, they don't have a lot of leverage points right now. And it seems as though one of the leverage points they're looking at is a potential the government shutdown. You heard Senator Cory Booker not ruling out using a government shutdown as a Democratic strategy to push back against Trump's agenda come March. So will you vote to fund the government then?
Well, I don't generally operate in absolutes, but I will tell you that. So I'm not going to say I absolutely will not vote for that, but I'm not going to take a vote that's going to hurt hundreds of millions of people. The cuts that they're proposing, and I think that's our job as Democrats over the next few weeks, to let people really understand what all these things mean. And I think it's really important to note they're talking about all of these cuts, but none of these conversations are about returning that money to the American people or lowering the cost or improving the lives of American people. In fact, in the proposal that they have already rolled out, it includes additional tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. People really need to understand that. I mean, there's small provisions like no tax on tips, but not closing any of these loopholes that allow for some of the wealthiest Americans to not pay any taxes, to have loopholes, to write off business expenses. So if we really want to lower costs for the American people and return that money to them, that would be reflected in their budget proposal, and it is not. And I am not going to vote for anything that continues to harm the American people.
All right, Congresswoman Jahana Hayes, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.